Scott stood in the docking bay of the Imperial warship, his hands steady despite the cold stares of 100 alien soldiers. The Valrith Empire had finally agreed to meet with humanity after 3 years of border skirmishes. He was not a general or an ambassador. He was a cultural liaison, chosen because he understood one thing the Valrith did not: empathy. The airlock hissed open. Princess Sophia emerged in silver armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Her skin shimmered pale blue, her eyes twin pools of mercury. She looked at Scott the way someone might observe a curious insect. "You are the human representative?" Her voice was melodic but cold. "I am," Scott replied. She circled him slowly. "I expected someone larger. More impressive. Humans value other qualities." Sophia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Then your species is already doomed." The Valrith homeworld, Krynax, gleamed beneath 3 suns. Towers of dark crystal stretched toward crimson skies. Scott followed Sophia through corridors filled with warriors whose armor bore the scars of countless battles. No one smiled. No one spoke unless necessary. Sophia's advisor, General Vorn, walked beside her. "Why did they send this one? He carries no weapons." "Humans fight differently," Sophia answered. "Or so they claim. I suspect they simply lack courage." Scott heard every word but kept his expression neutral. He had studied Valrith culture for months. They respected strength, strategy, and victory. Emotion was considered a flaw, a weakness that led to poor decisions. They entered the throne room where Emperor Calrex sat on a seat carved from a single massive gemstone. His presence was overwhelming, ancient and terrible. "This is humanity's offering," the Emperor rumbled. "I am here to build understanding," Scott said clearly. The Emperor's laugh shook the chamber. Scott was given quarters in the palace's lower levels, a clear insult. The room was bare metal, cold and unwelcoming. He did not complain. Instead, he unpacked his few belongings and a small data tablet containing everything humanity knew about the Valrith. That evening, he was summoned to a strategic council. Sophia sat at a long table surrounded by military leaders. They discussed border territories, resource rights, and battle formations. Scott listened carefully. "The human may observe," Sophia announced. "Perhaps he will learn what true strength looks like." General Vorn displayed a holographic map. 3 human colonies lie near our expansion route. They will surrender or be claimed. Scott leaned forward. "Those colonies house civilians. Families. Children." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Weakness. You think of individuals rather than empire. This is why you will fail." "Caring about individuals is not weakness," Scott replied quietly. The room fell silent. Then Sophia smiled, cruel and beautiful. "Prove it." The challenge was simple. Scott would accompany a Valrith patrol to a contested asteroid station. If he could demonstrate value without weapons or violence, Sophia would reconsider the colony invasions. If he failed, humanity would cede the territory immediately. Scott agreed. The patrol ship launched at dawn. 5 Valrith warriors accompanied him, including Commander Wraith, a veteran with scars across her face. They treated Scott like cargo, ignoring his presence entirely. The asteroid station appeared abandoned when they docked. Wraith's team moved through the corridors with weapons ready. Scott noticed details they missed: recent footprints in the dust, a door sealed from the inside, the faint sound of breathing behind a wall panel. "Someone is hiding here," Scott said. "We detected no life signs," Wraith replied. "Your sensors read Valrith biology. What if they're not Valrith?" Wraith paused, then signaled her team. They breached the panel and found a family of refugees from a species caught between human and Valrith space. Terrified, starving, but alive. Wraith wanted to leave the refugees. They were not Valrith, therefore not her concern. Scott knelt beside the youngest child, offering water from his own supply. They will die here, he said. That is their fate, Wraith answered. Scott looked up at her. Is strength only measured in what you can destroy? Or also in what you choose to protect? Something flickered in Wraith's expression. She ordered her team to load the refugees onto the ship. During the return journey, Scott helped the family, learned their names, and shared his rations. The Valrith warriors watched in confusion. When they returned to Krynax, Sophia was waiting. Wraith delivered her report, and to Scott's surprise, she did not minimize his role. The humans saw what we did not, Wraith admitted. Without him, we would have missed a potential intelligence source. Sophia's gaze fixed on Scott. You helped them because you felt sorry for them. That is not strategy. I helped them because it was right, Scott replied. Sometimes the right choice and the strategic choice are the same. Sophia's expression hardened. Your heart makes you predictable. Exploitable. Weak. Over the following weeks, Scott remained at the palace while negotiations continued through official channels. Sophia seemed determined to prove her point. She assigned him menial tasks, carrying supplies, cleaning equipment, organizing inventory. Work meant for servants. Scott completed every task without complaint. He noticed things others overlooked, a guard who favored his left leg from an old injury, a servant who flinched at loud sounds, patterns in the palace routine that revealed inefficiencies. Sophia observed him constantly, looking for signs of frustration or anger. She found none. Does nothing offend you, human? She asked one day, finding him in the armory polishing weapons. Many things offend me, Scott replied. I simply choose how to respond. That is control, not strength. Scott looked at her directly. What is strength without control? Sophia had no answer, but her eyes flashed with something between anger and curiosity. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. The imperial court gathered for a ceremonial display of combat prowess. Warriors competed in brutal matches while nobility watched from elevated platforms. Sophia sat beside her father, regal and remote. Scott stood among the lower attendees. General Vorn noticed him and smiled coldly. Perhaps the human would like to demonstrate his species' strength. Vorn announced loudly. The crowd murmured with amusement. Scott knew a trap when he saw one. Any warrior he faced would crush him. Refusing would confirm Valrith assumptions about human weakness. Fighting would end in humiliation or injury. Sophia leaned forward, interested in his choice. Scott stepped into the arena. I will compete, but not in combat. I propose a test of observation and strategy. Vorn laughed. Combat reveals truth. Words are for the weak. Then you should have no trouble with my challenge, Scott replied calmly. The Emperor raised a hand. I will allow it. Proceed. Scott's challenge was elegant, identify which of 10 identical containers held water by observation alone, no touching, no sensors. A test of patience and attention to subtle details. Vorn studied the containers impatiently. He chose quickly, confidently. He was wrong. Scott took his time. He watched the way light refracted differently through one container, noticed the slight condensation pattern, observed how dust settled on the surfaces. He chose correctly. The crowd was silent. Sophia's expression was unreadable. A parlor trick, Vorn muttered. A skill, Scott corrected. One that requires patience and careful attention. Warriors charge into battle with courage. But do they see the trap before it closes? Emperor Calrek studied Scott with new interest. You claim observation is a weapon. In the right hands, yes. Sophia stood abruptly and left the arena. Scott noticed the tension in her shoulders, the quick pace of her steps. She was angry, but more than that, she was unsettled. He was challenging everything her culture believed. That night, Scott found a message on his tablet. It contained a single line, "Meet me in the Eastern Garden. Alone. Sophia." The Eastern Garden was a strange place, filled with crystalline plants that hummed softly in the night wind. Sophia waited beside a fountain of liquid silver. "You embarrassed General Vorn today," she said without preamble. "I demonstrated a different kind of strength," Scott replied. Sophia turned to face him. "You speak constantly of heart, of feeling, of caring for others. Do you not understand that these things cloud judgment? My people conquered 12 systems because we do not hesitate, do not question, do not feel doubt." Scott moved closer. "And how many allies do you have? How many species trust you? How many would help you if you faced a threat you could not defeat alone? We need no help. We are strong." "Everyone needs help eventually," Scott said quietly. "Strength is not the absence of need. It is the wisdom to build connections before the crisis comes." Sophia's hands clenched. "You think yourself wise? You, who my people could destroy without effort. I think I understand something you have forgotten. That power without compassion is just tyranny. And tyranny always falls." For a moment, something vulnerable crossed Sophia's face. Then her mask returned. "Your heart will be your end, human. You will hesitate when you should strike. You will trust when you should doubt. And someone will use that against you." She walked away, leaving Scott alone among the singing crystals. The next day, Sophia announced that Scott would attend the upcoming conclave of houses, a gathering of noble families from across the empire. It was both an honor and a danger. The noble houses were vipers, constantly maneuvering for power and influence. "You will see the reality of politics," Sophia told him. "Not the fantasy you believe in." The conclave took place in the palace's grand hall. Representatives from a dozen noble houses attended, each more imposing than the last. Scott was introduced as a curiosity, the human who thought feelings were strength. Lady Miraxa of House Torn approached him, her smile predatory. "Tell me, human, if your child and a stranger's child were drowning, which would you save?" "Both," Scott answered. "Impossible. You have time for only one." "Then I would die trying to save both. Because choosing is accepting that one deserves death. I reject that premise." The nobles laughed, but Lady Miraxa's expression turned thoughtful. Sophia watched from across the room, her face carefully neutral. As the evening progressed, Scott noticed patterns in the conversations, alliances forming and breaking, promises made with words that meant their opposite. He also noticed how Sophia navigated it all with practiced ease, revealing nothing, committing to nothing, trusting no one. She was completely alone in a room full of her own people. After the conclave, Scott found Sophia in the palace archives, surrounded by holographic records. She looked tired, a crack in her usual perfect composure. "You are still here?" she asked. "I wanted to understand something," Scott said. "You move through your world with such confidence, such certainty. But tonight I saw something else." "And what did you see, human?" "Loneliness." Sophia's eyes flashed dangerously. "You know nothing of my life." "I know what it means to be surrounded by people and still feel alone," Scott replied gently. "You cannot trust anyone in your court. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every relationship is strategic. When was the last time someone asked how you felt without wanting something from you?" Sophia stood abruptly. "Feelings are irrelevant. I am a princess of the Valrith Empire. I need no one's concern. Everyone needs someone's concern." For a long moment, Sophia stared at him. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Why do you care?" "Because I see you," Scott answered. Not the princess, not the warrior, not the symbol. You. And you deserve to be seen. Sophia's composure cracked. Stop. You do not understand what you are saying. But Scott did understand. He was offering something no one in her world ever had, genuine care without agenda. In the days that followed, something shifted. Sophia stopped assigning Scott menial tasks. Instead, she included him in strategy sessions, asked his perspective on disputes, and occasionally sought him out in the gardens. They talked. Really talked. Scott learned that Sophia's mother had died in battle when she was young, that her father measured her worth only in martial achievement, that she had never been allowed to be anything other than a perfect weapon for the Empire. I was trained from childhood to suppress emotion, she confessed one evening. Fear makes you hesitate. Joy makes you careless. Love makes you vulnerable. Better to feel nothing and remain strong. But you do feel, Scott observed. I see it in the way you react when your father criticizes you. The way you watch the younger soldiers with something like concern. You have not lost your heart. You have just buried it. Sophia looked away. If I acknowledge those feelings, I lose my edge. I become weak. Or you become complete, Scott suggested. A warrior with both strength and wisdom. Strategy and compassion. Sophia laughed bitterly. My father would disown me. The court would see me as compromised. The Empire respects only power. Then perhaps the Empire needs to change. The words hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. General Vorn had been watching Scott carefully. He saw the time Sophia spent with the human, the way her demeanor shifted in Scott's presence. He saw a threat to Valrith purity, to everything the Empire stood for. Vorn began spreading whispers through the court. The human was manipulating the princess. He was weak, making her weak. If she continued to consort with him, she would be unfit to rule. Scott heard the whispers but did not respond. Sophia heard them too, and her walls started going back up. She avoided Scott for 3 days. When they finally spoke again, her voice was cold. The court questions my judgment because of you. Because you talked to me? Scott asked. Because I listened to you, Sophia corrected. Because I have been seen treating a human as something other than inferior. And what am I to you? Scott asked quietly. Sophia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing confusion and something that might have been fear. I do not know. That is the problem. Scott stepped closer. I am someone who sees your strength in your heart. Both. And I am telling you that you do not have to choose between them. You asked me to reject everything I was taught. Everything I am. I ask you to become everything you could be. Sophia turned away, her shoulders tight. Leave me. Please. Scott left, but not before seeing the wetness on her cheeks. Emperor Calrex summoned Scott to a private audience. The throne room felt larger and colder when empty except for the two of them. You have caused disruption in my court, the Emperor said. I have offered a different perspective, Scott replied. You have made my daughter question herself. For a warrior, doubt is death. Scott met the Emperor's gaze steadily. With respect, doubt is wisdom. Certainty without question leads to stagnation and eventually collapse. Your daughter is brilliant. If she could combine her strategic mind with genuine understanding of others, she would be unstoppable. Calrex leaned forward. You speak of making her soft. I speak of making her complete. A blade is strongest when it has both edge and flexibility. Rigid metal shatters. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. You care for her. It was not a question. Scott considered lying but knew the Emperor would see through it. I respect her. I see her potential. Yes, I care what happens to her. That is your weakness, Calrex said. You have given me the weapon to control you. Threaten her, and you will do as I command. Scott smiled sadly. You see it as a weakness. I see it as the most powerful force in the universe. People who have something to protect fight harder than people who only have orders. The Emperor dismissed him with a wave, but Scott saw something calculating in those ancient eyes. The Emperor was not entirely convinced, but he was thinking. And that was a start. Sophia began training Scott in Valrith combat techniques. She claimed it was to make him less of an embarrassment, but Scott suspected other motives. The training sessions became a space where they could talk freely, away from the court's eyes. You are terrible at this, Sophia observed as Scott tried to execute a defensive stance. I am a diplomat, not a warrior, Scott replied, breathless. Sophia adjusted his posture with her hands, professional but lingering just slightly. If you are to survive in this court, you must be both. Why do you want me to survive? Scott asked. The question caught her off guard. She stepped back. You are a useful asset. You see patterns others miss. You understand motivation. That is the official answer. What is the real one? Sophia's mask cracked. Because when I am with you, I do not have to be the perfect princess. I can just be Sophia. And I had forgotten what that felt like. Scott reached out, gently touching her arm. You do not have to forget anymore. Sophia looked at his hand on her arm, such a simple gesture of connection. In her world, touch was for combat or formal ceremony, nothing more. This was different. This was offered freely, expecting nothing, just comfort and connection. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know, Scott replied. Neither of them pulled away. House Torn made a formal proposal to Emperor Calrex. Lady Miraxa's eldest son would marry Princess Sophia, uniting two powerful houses and securing the northern territories. It was strategically perfect. Sophia was informed of the decision as a formality. Her consent was assumed, irrelevant. She found Scott in the archives, her expression carefully controlled but her eyes betraying fury. I am to be married, she announced. Scott felt his heart sink. To the son of Lady Miraxa. You heard. Congratulations, Scott said, the word ashes in his mouth. Sophia's composure shattered. Congratulations. I am being sold like a strategic resource, and you offer congratulations. What would you have me say? Scott asked quietly. I am a human diplomat with no power, no title, no right to object to the decisions of the Valrith Empire. You could say that it is wrong. That I should have a choice. Scott stood and faced her. It is wrong. You should have a choice. You should have the freedom to choose your own path, to be more than a piece on your father's strategic board. You deserve to be valued for yourself, not for your political utility. Sophia's breath caught. No one has ever said such things to me. Then no one has been paying attention, Scott replied. Because you are remarkable, Sophia. Not because you are a princess. Because you are you. The distance between them disappeared. For one brief, perfect moment, nothing else existed. Then General Vorn's voice shattered the silence from the doorway. How touching. Wait until the Emperor hears of this. Scott and Sophia were brought before Emperor Calrex with the entire court assembled. General Vorn had witnessed inappropriate contact between the princess and the human. He demanded Scott's immediate execution and Sophia's formal reprimand. The court waited, eager for drama and blood. Emperor Calrex looked at his daughter. What do you say to these charges? Sophia stood tall. Scott has been nothing but respectful. General Vorn misinterprets a conversation between allies. Allies? Vorn spat. He is a human. Inferior. Weak. He pollutes your judgment, princess. Sophia's eyes flashed. He has shown more wisdom than many in this court. He has demonstrated skills our warriors lack. He has proven his value repeatedly. He has made you soft, Calrex said quietly. You defend him with emotion, not logic. I defend him with both, Sophia replied. Logically, he is an asset. Emotionally, he is someone I trust. I am capable of both, father. Perhaps that makes me stronger, not weaker. The court gasped. No one spoke to the emperor that way. Calrex stood, his presence overwhelming. You will marry the son of House Torn in 3 days. The human will be confined to quarters until negotiations with his people are complete. Then he will leave Krynax and never return. This is my final word. Scott caught Sophia's eye. Her expression was devastated but resigned. She had tried and failed. In the Valrith Empire, the Emperor's word was absolute law. Scott was escorted to his quarters by armed guards. The room was now locked from the outside. He had 3 days before Sophia's wedding, and then he would be sent away forever. He did not waste time on despair. Instead, he began to observe. The guards changed shifts every 6 hours. Meals were delivered through a slot in the door. The ventilation system connected to other parts of the palace. And people talked when they thought he could not hear. He learned that Lady Mirax's house had significant debts. The marriage would erase them through imperial favor. He learned that General Vorn had been promised a command position once the union was complete. He learned that several noble houses opposed the marriage but feared speaking against the emperor. Most importantly, he learned that Sophia had locked herself in her chambers and refused to see anyone. On the second night of his confinement, Scott heard a sound at his door. Commander Wraith, the warrior from the asteroid station mission, slipped inside. I have perhaps 5 minutes, she said quietly. The princess sent me. She wants you to know she is sorry. Tell her there is nothing to apologize for, Scott replied. The Empire's laws are not her fault. Wraith hesitated. She also wants you to know that she would choose differently if she could. That you showed her another way to live. That she will remember. Scott's throat tightened. Tell her I know. Tell her she is the strongest person I have ever met. And tell her that hearts are never wasted, even when they break. Wraith nodded and slipped away into the shadows. The wedding day arrived with ceremony and pageantry. The great hall was filled with nobles from across the empire. Scott was brought under guard to witness a calculated cruelty by General Vorn. Sophia entered in traditional wedding armor, silver and radiant. Her face was a perfect mask. Her betrothed, Lord Crane of House Torn, stood waiting. He was tall, powerful, and looked at Sophia with possessive pride. Emperor Calrex began the ceremonial words. Scott watched helplessly, his heart breaking. Then he noticed something. A servant moving through the crowd, positioning slightly wrong. A guard whose hand rested on his weapon with too much readiness. Small details, wrong patterns. Scott's mind raced. He looked at the servant's face, memorized the features, and compared them to every person he had observed in the palace. The face was unfamiliar. A stranger in a place where everyone was catalogued and known. His heart screamed danger, but he was locked between 2 guards, powerless to act. He watched the servant move closer to Sophia, and everything clicked into place. The timing, the positioning, the way other House Torn members had subtly moved away from the princess. This was not a wedding. It was an assassination. House Torn would marry Sophia and eliminate her in one move, claiming grief while seizing power. Scott did the only thing he could. He shouted, Sophia, down. Everything happened in seconds. The false servant's hand went to his belt. Scott threw himself forward, breaking free from his surprised guards. The weapon cleared concealment, a bladed disc designed to decapitate from a distance. Scott's body moved on instinct and training Sophia had drilled into him. He could not reach the assassin, but he could reach Sophia. He crashed into her, driving her to the ground as the blade whistled through the space where her neck had been. The blade struck Scott's shoulder instead, biting deep. Pain exploded through him, but he kept moving, covering Sophia with his body as chaos erupted in the hall. Palace guards swarmed the assassin. Lord Crane drew his weapon, but not to defend Sophia. He moved toward the Emperor, revealing the full scope of the plot. House Torn had planned to eliminate both the Emperor and his heir in the confusion. They had not planned on Scott's warning or the seconds it bought the Imperial Guard. Crane was cut down before he reached the throne. Lady Miraxa tried to flee and was captured. The false servant took poison before he could be questioned. Through it all, Scott stayed over Sophia, his blood pooling on the ceremonial floor, his vision narrowing. He felt her hands on his face, heard her voice calling his name, but the words seemed distant and strange. Why? Sophia's voice broke through. Why did you do that? Scott smiled weakly. Because your heart is worth saving. Always was. Then darkness took him. Scott woke in medical facilities beyond anything human technology could match. Sophia sat beside his bed, still in her wedding armor, now stained with his blood. You are awake, she said, her voice rough. How long? Scott managed. 2 days. You nearly died. The blade was poisoned. Scott tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Sophia gently pushed him back down, her touch careful. The court is in upheaval, she continued. House Torn has been dissolved. 3 other houses have been implicated in the plot. My father is restructuring the entire nobility system. And you? Scott asked. Sophia's mask was completely gone. Tears tracked down her blue-silver cheeks. I have been asking myself why a human diplomat with no combat training, no armor, no weapons, threw himself in front of a blade meant for me. You know why, Scott said quietly. You mocked my heart, Sophia whispered. You said it made me weak, made me vulnerable, made me foolish. And then your heart saved my life. You saw the danger because you have spent months observing people, caring about details others ignore, connecting with individuals rather than just calculating strategy. Your heart made you more aware, not less. She took his hand carefully, mindful of the medical equipment. I was wrong. About everything. Scott squeezed her hand gently. You were taught wrong. There is a difference. I told you that caring for others was a weakness that would be exploited, Sophia continued. But you cared anyway. And when the moment came, that care saved both our lives. Emperor Calrex visited Scott's medical chamber that evening. Sophia stepped aside as her father approached the bed. You saved my daughter's life, Calrex said. You saw a threat my own guards missed. You acted without hesitation despite having every reason to let events unfold. I could not let her die, Scott replied simply. Because you care for her. Yes. Calrex nodded slowly. I built an empire on the principle that emotion was weakness. That caring was a liability. That only cold logic and hard strength mattered. You have demonstrated the flaw in that philosophy. He turned to look at Sophia. You would have died because I taught you to ignore your instincts, to suppress your feelings, to trust only strategy. The human lived by different principles and saw what we could not. Father, Sophia began, but Calrex raised a hand. The marriage contract with House Torn is void. The noble houses will be restructured with new leadership. And the alliance with humanity will be formalized with full partnership status. Scott's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I am grateful, but I made no demands. I know, Calrex replied. That is precisely why you have earned this. You asked for nothing and gave everything. That is a principle worth honoring. The Emperor left, and Sophia returned to Scott's side. He has never admitted being wrong before, she said softly. You changed him. You changed all of us. I just cared, Scott said. Sometimes that is enough. Scott's recovery took 2 weeks. Sophia visited every day, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about the restructuring of the empire, sometimes just holding his hand and being present. On the day he was cleared to leave medical care, she took him back to the Eastern Garden where they had argued about the value of emotion. I said your heart would be your end, Sophia reminded him. That you would trust when you should doubt, hesitate when you should strike. I remember. I want to apologize for that. And for every other time I dismissed what you tried to teach me. Scott smiled. You were defending what you believed. I do not fault you for that. Sophia moved closer. I want to learn. Truly learn. Not to be soft or weak, but to be complete. To have both the strength my father taught me and the wisdom you demonstrated. Will you stay and teach me? Stay on Krynax. Stay with me, Sophia clarified, her voice vulnerable in a way it had never been. As an advisor. As a friend. As whatever you want to be. I am not ordering you. I am asking. Scott reached for her hand. I came here to build a bridge between our people. I did not expect to find something else. What did you find? Someone worth knowing, Scott said simply. Someone worth saving. Someone who saved me right back by letting me be myself. Sophia's eyes shimmered. Is that a yes? That is definitely a yes. Over the following months, Scott became an official member of Sophia's advisory council. Together, they began implementing changes throughout the Valrith Empire. Training programs that valued observation and empathy alongside combat skills. Diplomatic initiatives that sought understanding rather than just dominance. Restructured noble houses that rewarded wisdom and service, not just military might. Not everyone approved. Traditionalists resisted. But Sophia had her father's support and Scott's guidance. More importantly, she had confidence in her own judgment now, trusting both her strategic mind and her instincts. Human-Valrith relations transformed. Trade agreements flourished. Cultural exchanges began. The border skirmishes that had threatened war gave way to cooperation and mutual respect. Scott and Sophia became a symbol of that cooperation, the human and the princess who had bridged 2 worlds. They appeared together at ceremonies, negotiated treaties as partners, and spent quiet evenings in the Eastern Garden talking about everything and nothing. Do you miss Earth? Sophia asked one such evening. Sometimes, Scott admitted. But I have found something here that I never had there. What is that? Purpose. Connection. Someone who sees me for who I am. Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months before. I see you, Scott. And I am grateful every day that you saw me too. A year after the assassination attempt, the Valrith Empire and the Human Coalition signed the Treaty of Krynax, a comprehensive alliance that united both civilizations. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall where Scott had once saved Sophia's life. Emperor Calrex spoke of strength through unity, wisdom through diversity, and the value of looking beyond old assumptions. Human ambassadors spoke of respect, partnership, and shared future. But it was Sophia who gave the speech that everyone remembered. I was taught that emotion was weakness, she said to the assembled crowd. That caring for others made you vulnerable, that trust was foolish, that only cold logic and military might mattered. A human named Scott showed me the flaw in that teaching. He showed me that hearts are not weaknesses. They are compasses that point toward what truly matters. She looked directly at Scott, standing among the human delegation. He was mocked for his compassion. Dismissed for his empathy. Underestimated because he valued connection over conquest. And then his heart, the very thing we scorned, saved my life and changed an empire. Sophia stepped down from the podium and walked to Scott, extending her hand. This treaty represents more than politics. It represents the principle that different strengths can complement rather than contradict. That we are better together than apart. And that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is care deeply in a world that calls it weakness. Scott took her hand. The crowd erupted in approval, Valrath and human voices blending together. Later, in the quiet after the ceremony, Sophia and Scott stood together in the eastern garden beneath 3 setting suns. "What happens now?" Sophia asked. Scott smiled. "We build something new. Together." Sophia nodded. Together. And in that moment, with their hands intertwined and 2 civilizations united, the future stretched out before them bright with possibility. The princess who had learned to honor her heart and the human who had never stopped believing in its power. Their story was just beginning.